Number 1. My friend Lucas has a 27-foot center console boat, and during the summer he's the friend everyone relies on for boat days. None of us own boats, so when Lucas invites us out, we all jump at the chance. I'm not much of a boating expert, but Lucas's boat has some kind of radar system that warns us of nearby land, shallow waters, and other boats. This allows us to stay out on the water even after dark, which adds a bit of adventure to our trips. One hot day in mid-July, Lucas invited 5 of us to join him for a day out on the bay. We spent hours enjoying the sun, the water, and a cooler full of refreshing drinks. Later, we docked at a waterfront bar and restaurant to grab a bite and relax. As the evening progressed, we still had energy and drinks left, so Lucas suggested we head back out into the lagoon to keep the night going. Since Lucas doesn't really drink, he was more than happy to continue captaining the boat while we enjoyed the ride. We slowly cruised through the lagoon, music playing and the cool night air creating the perfect atmosphere. At one point, we passed by a lighthouse on the barrier island, and we started talking about how there's something a bit eerie about lighthouses at night. They're meant to guide and protect, but in the dark, they can feel lonely and haunting. Lucas eventually cut the engine and we floated in place, letting the music play softly in the background while we talked. I found myself staring at the lighthouse repeatedly, unable to shake a strange feeling. It was like the quiet unease that comes with being out on the water at night. Suddenly, I heard something that made my heart skip a beat. A scream, faint but unmistakable, coming from somewhere in the distance. I quickly told everyone to stop the music, and after a few seconds of silence, we all heard it again. A woman screaming for help. We were floating near a small island situated between the mainland and the barrier island, and it was clear that the screams were coming from that island. The realization hit us hard. Someone was in serious trouble. We called out, trying to locate the source of the screams. The woman's voice called back, "Help! I'm being followed." That single phrase sent chills down our spines. Without a second thought, Lucas started the engine and steered us toward the island. Once we were close enough, he anchored the boat, and all 6 of us jumped out, flashlights in hand, and began searching for the woman who needed help. The island wasn't very large, and with all of us searching, we thought we'd find her quickly. But as we combed through the trees and brush, there was no sign of anyone. Then a blood-curdling scream echoed through the night, this time sounding muffled as if someone was trying to silence it. We all ran towards the sound, our hearts pounding with fear and adrenaline. But when we reached the other side of the island, there was nothing. No woman, no signs of a struggle, just the dark, empty shoreline. Lucas and our friend Ethan were already there when I arrived, and they told me they heard the sound of a boat motor starting up and speeding away. We could see a fresh wake in the water, indicating that a boat had just left, but it was too dark to see anything beyond the immediate area. Panicked, I called 911 and reported what had happened. Within minutes, a Bay Patrol boat arrived and we quickly explained everything to the officers. They radioed the details to other patrol boats, turning the situation into a full-blown search. But as far as we know, they never found the boat or the woman. We returned to the marina, our minds racing with questions and fear. We spent the rest of the night at Lucas's house, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But to this day, we still don't have any answers. There were no news reports of missing women, no follow-up from the authorities, just silence. Was it a kidnapping? A horrifying prank? We'll never know. But that night on the water will always haunt us, a reminder of how quickly a fun evening can turn into something out of a nightmare. Number 2. This is a story that my dad and Uncle Mark have told at countless family gatherings, and every time they do, it sends shivers down our spines. It's one of those stories that lingers long after it's been told. It all happened back in the 1980s. My dad and Uncle Mark have always been passionate about fishing. They'd go deep-sea fishing a few times a year in Uncle Mark's boat, a massive 2-cabin cruiser from the 1970s. I've seen pictures of it, and let me tell you, that boat was enormous. Uncle Mark lived in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, where he kept the boat docked. My dad would often visit for the weekend so they could head out to sea together for a night of fishing. I've never been into fishing myself. Despite my dad's best efforts to get me hooked, it just wasn't my thing. But even without being an expert, I know that the deeper you go into the ocean, the bigger and more plentiful the fish. My dad and Uncle Mark usually aim to catch striped bass, tuna, and cod, heading about 20 miles out to sea to fill the boat with as much as they could. Fishing wasn't just a hobby for them, it was an obsession. To this day, Uncle Mark's house is filled with pictures of him and my dad proudly holding up their catches. But there's one fishing trip they'll never forget, and not for the usual reasons. One night, under a cloudy sky with no moonlight to guide them, they found themselves in an unexpectedly eerie situation. After enjoying a hearty meal, they were in the cabin, having a beer and playing cards when suddenly, the boat's lights went out. Uncle Mark quickly realized something was wrong and grabbed a flashlight to check the circuit panel. It turned out that 2 of the fuses had blown, leaving the boat almost entirely without power, including the crucial running lights. With no lights and only a weak flashlight, they decided it was safer to call it a night and wait until dawn to head back to shore. But not long after settling in, they began to hear an unsettling sound. A low humming noise coming from somewhere in the darkness about 20 meters away. Curious and a bit uneasy, they stepped out onto the deck. My dad always says that it was so dark outside, you couldn't even tell if your eyes were open or closed. The humming noise continued, but it didn't sound like any fish they knew. It was more like a person groaning, a deep, eerie sound that sent a chill through both of them. Despite using the flashlight, they couldn't see anything beyond a few meters in front of them. With rain starting to fall, they knew it wasn't safe to try navigating in the pitch-black night, so they reluctantly went back inside the cabin to wait out the storm. At the first light of dawn, Uncle Mark woke up my dad, urging him to come outside. Through the thick morning fog, they spotted another boat floating nearby. Uncle Mark decided to investigate, so he carefully maneuvered their boat closer, blew the whistle on board to get the attention of anyone who might be inside, and then tied the 2 boats together. When no one responded, Uncle Mark climbed aboard the other vessel. The cabin door was unlocked, and as he stepped inside, he was hit by a sickening smell, a smell he instantly recognized as death. What he found was horrifying, a man hanging by a rope inside the cabin. Uncle Mark was so shocked that he bolted out of the cabin and barely made it back to his boat before he started to retch over the side. My dad, seeing his brother's reaction, didn't dare go down to see the body for himself. Instead, they marked their coordinates and immediately contacted the nearest Coast Guard station through the VHF radio. The Coast Guard arrived within an hour, taking over the scene as my dad and Uncle Mark headed back to shore, both shaken by what they had encountered. To this day, they still don't know what that strange humming sound was or how it connected to the abandoned boat. Uncle Mark, in particular, is haunted by the memory of what he saw that morning. It's a story that neither of them can forget, and it remains the most chilling tale of their many years of fishing. Number 3. I live with my family on a private canal in Florida, and while I'll keep the exact location private, I can tell you it's about a 15-minute ride from our canal to the ocean. We have a few watercraft, including a couple of jet skis that my sister and I use, and my dad's pride and joy, a 35-foot 2007 Proline Express boat. Our family consists of 4 members: my mom, dad, sister, and me. I'm 23 and my sister Emily is 26. We grew up in Florida, and although we have other homes in California and New York, this Florida house is what we consider our main home. It's in a gated community, and since our parents often travel, Emily and I are frequently left to look after the house, along with our loyal dog Max. Being the last house on the canal, we enjoy quite a bit of privacy, with a marshy area bordering one side of the property. Because of our secluded location, Emily and I occasionally host parties or get-togethers with friends in our spacious backyard. One particularly hot day, Emily and I decided to take our jet skis out for a ride. As usual, we made our way through the canal and into the bay, where we often spend our time riding around or sometimes venturing under the bridge and out into the ocean. On this day, we opted to stay in the bay because the ocean was a bit too choppy. After cruising around for a while, we decided to take a break in the middle of the bay, just floating and enjoying the view. Not long after, a medium-sized boat approached us, piloted by an older man who looked to be in his late 50s or early 60s. He was on the heavier side and had a beer in hand even while driving his boat. He started chatting with us, asking about our jet skis and telling us about his own watercraft and the big house he claimed to have nearby. Then he invited us to come over for a swim in his pool. Both Emily and I politely declined, saying we needed to head back soon. But when he pressed further and asked where we were from, we kept our answers vague, just mentioning that we were locals. Sensing that it was time to leave, Emily started her jet ski, signaling that we were done with the conversation. We waved goodbye as we sped off, trying to be as friendly as possible, even though we both agreed that his invitation had been a little too forward and unsettling. After riding around for a bit longer, we decided to call it a day and headed back towards the canal. As we were making our way home, we noticed a boat following us at a distance. When we got closer, it became clear. It was the same man from the bay. He seemed to be slowly drifting, just passing the entrance to our canal. We weren't sure if he had followed us intentionally or if he just happened to live down one of the intersecting canals. Nevertheless, we continued on our way, docked our jet skis, and began washing them down. But as we were doing so, we noticed his boat approaching our house. He stopped right in front of our dock and started talking to us again, this time complimenting our house and backyard. Emily, not one to hold back, finally asked, "Why did you follow us here?" "That's really creepy." The man claimed he lived in the same community and just wanted to check out our canal. But something about his demeanor made us both uncomfortable. Sensing that he wasn't welcome, he eventually turned his boat around and drifted away, waving as he left. We didn't wave back. At that moment, we knew this wasn't just a friendly neighborly interaction. It felt much more sinister. We immediately called our dad and told him about the encounter. He wasn't pleased that we hadn't gotten the registration number of the boat, something we hadn't even thought to do at the time. Later that night, things took an even creepier turn. Max, our dog, started barking furiously downstairs in the middle of the night. Both Emily and I woke up and, alarmed, I looked out my bedroom window towards the backyard. That's when I saw something that still haunts me, a large figure running across our yard towards the dock, then jumping into what looked like a boat in the water. I quickly opened the window to get a better look, but by then, whoever it was had disappeared. Emily and I rushed downstairs, turned on all the lights, and peered out the back door. The intruder was gone, but we both knew who it had to be, the man from the canal. The only thing that gave us some peace of mind was the thought that Max's barking might have scared him off before he could do anything worse. The next day, we asked our neighbors if any of them had security cameras that might have caught something, but unfortunately, none of them had cameras pointing towards the canal. Ever since that night, whenever we go out on the water, we can't help but keep an eye out for that man and his boat. We've been more cautious and aware of our surroundings, but the memory of that encounter still lingers, reminding us that even in a gated community, you can never be too careful. Number 4. A few months after my family moved into our new home, some friends of ours from Utah asked if they could visit for the weekend. Excited to show them around, we eagerly agreed. One of the highlights of our area was a large dock by the river, where locals would gather to fish for shrimp, crabs, and bait. We had once seen a man place a light in the water to attract a swarm of shrimp, and we thought it would be a cool experience to share with our friends, especially since they didn't have anything like that back in Utah. However, being a typical teenager, I wasn't too thrilled about hanging out with my parents' friends, especially since their kids were much younger than me. So, when my family decided to check out a nearby restaurant, I opted to stay behind at the dock. It was a beautiful night, and I was content to sit by the water, gaze at the stars, and enjoy the peaceful sounds of the river. As I sat there, the tranquility was suddenly interrupted by a voice calling out from the darkness. "Hey there, miss." "Hey, blonde," a man's voice called out. Startled, I looked towards the lower part of the dock and saw a man standing next to a small metal boat. It was too dark to see his face clearly, so I had no idea what he looked like. Despite my initial fear, I was too shy to respond, but my glance in his direction was enough to encourage him to keep talking. "Are you all alone, miss? Why don't you hop into the boat with us? We can take you for a ride if you'd like," he said. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I noticed a much larger man and a woman sitting on the boat, though the woman remained silent throughout the entire exchange. Although I had a bit of a rebellious streak when it came to my parents, I wasn't foolish. I knew this situation was wrong, but I was also raised to be polite, and for a moment I was unsure how to respond. Finally, I mustered up the courage to say, "No, I'm sorry, I can't. My mom would be really upset if I did." The larger man on the boat placed one of his feet onto the dock while the smaller man kept urging me. "It's okay. We're just going to a little get-together on one of the islands. She doesn't have to know. Come on, hop in," he said as he began walking up the steps towards me. That was when it really hit me. I was alone. The part of the dock I was on was empty, with no fishermen nearby because it was where the boats usually came in. My family had left for the restaurant, leaving me completely by myself. As the man approached, I felt a wave of fear wash over me. My mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. Just as panic began to set in, I heard the familiar sound of my family chatting as they exited the restaurant. It was the stroke of luck I needed. I quickly stood up and called out loudly, "Sorry, it looks like my family is leaving. I have to go now." Without waiting for a response, I sprinted away from the dock and back towards my family. When I finally caught up with them, they were completely unaware of what had just happened. They hadn't even noticed that I had stayed behind. As I glanced back towards the dock, I saw that the two men, the woman, and the boat were gone. To this day, I still shudder to think about what could have happened if my parents hadn't walked out of that restaurant at that exact moment. Would those men have tried to force me onto the boat? Would anyone have heard me if I had screamed for help? I've never gone alone to the dock since that night, and thankfully I've never seen that boat or those men again. Number 5. In late September, 3 friends, Emma, Jack, and Lucas, decided to spend a weekend exploring the rugged beauty of Fairhaven. Emma, an avid photographer, was eager to capture the coastal landscapes. Jack, an amateur historian, wanted to delve into the town's maritime legends. Lucas, the practical one, simply wanted a break from his hectic job. They rented a classic 30-foot sailboat named the Seafarer from the local marina. It was a sturdy vessel, well-maintained but with a distinct vintage charm. The owner, Mr. Thompson, a weathered old sailor, warned them, "Be careful out there. The mariner's ghost has been known to make an appearance when you least expect it." They laughed off his words, thinking they were just old sailors' tales meant to entertain tourists. The morning of their departure was crisp and clear. They set sail from Fairhaven Harbor, heading towards the less-traveled waters off the coast. The boat handled well, cutting through the gentle waves with ease. Emma snapped photos of the picturesque scenery while Jack read from a book about local legends. Lucas manned the helm, steering them towards a secluded cove known for its natural beauty. As the sun began to set, they anchored near a small, uninhabited island. The cove was serene, with only the distant cries of seabirds and the gentle lapping of water against the hull breaking the silence. They spent the evening grilling dinner on the boat and sharing ghost stories, the fading light adding an eerie atmosphere to their tales. As night fell, the sky darkened rapidly, and a heavy fog began to roll in from the ocean. The visibility decreased, turning the water into a thick, murky gray. They decided to turn in early, but just before they did, Jack noticed something odd. A faint, flickering light appeared through the fog, like a lantern bobbing on the water. "Look at that," Jack said, pointing towards the light. Emma squinted, her camera ready. "Could be another boat," she suggested. They watched as the light moved closer, revealing the silhouette of a vessel shrouded in mist. It wasn't like any boat they had seen before. It was old-fashioned, with wooden sails and ornate carvings on its bow. "It looks like something out of a ghost story," Lucas said, trying to make light of the situation. But as the mysterious boat drew closer, they noticed something unsettling. The figurehead of the boat, a ghastly, skeletal face, seemed to be watching them. The spectral vessel came to a halt near their anchored boat. The fog thickened, enveloping them in an eerie silence. Emma tried to photograph the ghostly ship, but her camera's flash seemed to vanish into the darkness, offering no illumination. Without warning, a voice echoed across the water, chilling and hollow, "Have you come for the treasure?" Emma, Jack, and Lucas exchanged nervous glances. They had heard no one approach, yet the voice was unmistakably close. "We don't want any trouble," Jack called out. "We're just here to enjoy the night." The reply came, colder and more sinister. "The treasure lies where the waters are restless. Join us if you dare." The ghost ship's crew, clad in tattered, old-fashioned sailor's garb, moved with an unnatural grace. They seemed to glide rather than walk, their faces obscured by shadows. The sight was so unnerving that Emma's hands trembled as she tried to take a photograph. Suddenly, the spectral crew began to chant in an ancient, mournful tune. The sound was both beautiful and terrifying, resonating with an otherworldly echo. The fog swirled around the ghost ship, and the boat's lanterns flickered as if struggling to stay lit. Panic set in. Lucas started the engine, but it sputtered and coughed as though it too was afraid of the ghostly presence. Jack grabbed the radio, but static filled the airwaves, making communication impossible. "We need to get out of here," Emma shouted, her voice strained. They tried to untie the boat, but the ropes seemed tangled in an almost supernatural way. As they struggled, the ghost ship drew closer, its crew now visible in their eerie, glowing forms. The chanting grew louder, and the fog seemed to press in on them. Finally, with a mighty effort, they managed to free the ropes and started the engine. The boat lurched forward, plowing through the thick fog. The ghost ship followed for a few moments before it vanished into the mist, as if swallowed by the darkness. When they finally reached the safety of Fairhaven Harbor, the fog began to lift. The ghostly ship was nowhere to be seen. They were exhausted and shaken but relieved to be back on solid ground. The next morning, Mr. Thompson asked how their trip had gone. When they told him about the ghost ship, his face turned pale. "You saw the mariner's ghost?" he said quietly. "Legend has it that those who see her are forever marked. She only appears to those who are lost or seeking something." Emma's camera, which had been malfunctioning throughout the encounter, showed a single blurry image of the ghost ship. The spectral vessel's figurehead, with its ghastly grin, was unmistakable. To this day, Emma, Jack, and Lucas avoid the waters around that secluded cove. The mariner's ghost remains a haunting memory, a chilling reminder that some legends are more than just stories. Thank you for watching.